lost private. We're in Normandy.
Thanks for checking in here at the We're Not Lost Private podcast. We appreciate all your support. But do you know how else you can support us? By signing up at Patreon. For $3 a month, you'll have access to all of our episodes, plus access to all kinds of bonus material, like our quarterly newsletter, photographs, and official paperwork, and research that goes into each and every show. You can follow the pod on a multitude of platforms such as YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, pretty much anywhere you catch your pods. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon. Welcome, everybody, to episode 38 of the We're Not Lost Private podcast. This one's coming at you fairly soon after 37. It's a bit of a flash podcast. And most of it has to do with the fact that there has been a ton of discourse lately on multiple social media platforms about a YouTube channel that is essentially putting out a lot of misinformation about Band of Brothers. And I've done a few of these debunking shows before. I did one that was very popular with audiences when I joined Paul Woodage and World War II TV to do a 10 Myths of Easy Company. That one garnered quite a bit of attention and also brought me a lot of new viewers and listeners. So I'm really appreciative of that. And I've done a couple of my own, one on Sobel and then episode 22, which is more of a Q&A, but I touched on a lot of Band of Brothers myths, Easy Company myths. I know the hardcore historians will be rolling their eyes. It's another Easy Company podcast, but in this case, I believe this one's warranted because of the amount of incorrect information being put out by this particular YouTube channel. The channel apparently started out as called War and Truth. The new channel has Band of Brothers in its title, and I've prepared some slides to help guide me through this because there are way too many 10-minute episodes on this person's channel for me to cover in total. If I did, I'd probably be 2 or 3 shows. But I wanted to pick probably the most egregious falsehoods presented in a number of those episodes on that particular channel. I'm not going to name the channel. I don't want to give that individual any more free advertising than they're already getting. It's just a little frustrating when you work hard to put out a good product and then you see something as poor as this being done and then garnering 5,000 views a show, which is definitely a little disheartening if you're somebody like me who works very hard to put out content. But in this case, I'm gonna share my slide deck here. But for those of you that are listening, in your car or wherever, don't worry, you're not going to miss out. It's going to be very verbal. You'll be able to see the whole thing. So bear with me. Separating myth and reality again, again, because I feel like I'm doing these like every quarter, but it's okay. I don't mind. There's an audience for it. There's an immense popularity for this particular parachute infantry company because of Band of Brothers. And I want to make sure that the folks that have a true passion for learning the history of the company get the right history and not somebody else's falsehoods. So a few points before we dive into the actual particular stories. Please be discerning. And it's going to be a little preachy in here, and I apologize. But if it looks or sounds fake, it probably is. AI renderings of Easy Company voices are just that. They're renderings. They're not the real deal. This particular YouTube channel likes to try and pass off AI generated voices as the actual voices of the Easy Company veterans. They are clearly not. And we'll get to one of them in particular. It's garnered a lot of discussion. Be careful with sources that only deal in sensationalized topics. Most read almost all of the time. They are stories that particular person's peddling, and they're incorrect or poorly contextualized. If one channel on YouTube pops up after its previous iteration was shut down, that should be a warning sign. Another point, just because someone has copies of official paperwork does not mean they have the whole story. In particular, this YouTube channel provider managed to get a copy of Major Winter's paperwork collection. Now, this is not difficult. There are several archives out there that have copies of it, and some of them have digitize them all for download for no charge. The problem is that Major Winters, despite the fact that he was an excellent chronicler of the company and the larger battalion's history, it is not complete. There are many things missing from it, and most of all, the biggest thing that's missing from it is additional correspondence with the other veterans of the company. Everything becomes very myopic because it's viewed through the major's viewpoint. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just something that has to be taken into consideration as you look at these various stories. If a channel or a pod refuses to come clean with their sources, it's a good sign that their reporting is garbage. True historians have no issue citing their sources. I've cited my sources on this particular podcast. I've cited them uh, on postings on social media. This particular channel refuses to show its sources, basically show its homework, which is a warning sign that it's probably not on the up and up. And lastly, when a channel paywalls its controversial videos, it's because they're hiding them from scrutiny. Again, when we get to this particular story that kind of touched off all of this discussion, I'll give some more insights into that particular last statement. But I also wanted to put out that the books and the YouTube channel in question, right? The books in question really are Band of Brothers and Beyond Band of Brothers. The second being Major Dick Winter's authorized biography, written by the Major and Cole Kingseed. What you'll notice if you go through these videos, a lot of times there's no real new information. It's almost as if he's plagiarizing large portions of the books as filler for the videos. Now, this is fine, but if you're not going to cite the books, then you're essentially you're plagiarizing. It's just a new packaging of stories from Band of Brothers and Beyond Band using AI generated voices. And by the way, most of them sound terrible. And many of the stories that this particular channel is presenting are misrepresented, and it shows that the originator or the content creator demonstrates little actual knowledge about what happened. So we're going to kick this off with Tab. Floyd Talbert. Obviously, those of you who know the history of the company, Tab served in 3rd Platoon. He served in 1st Platoon. He served as the company first sergeant. There's a slideshow, there's a video on what happened with Tab. And really what's disappointing is there's no new information here. If you've read the books, you've gotten all the information. It's just being presented in video format with an AI voice generated on it. The only thing that might be new in there is there's some insights from Major Winter's daughter, Jill. Only the information that this individual is packaging up, it shows that there's a lack of knowledge about the people involved. In fact, it doesn't even know that Jill has a married name, and he uses her. He assigns her the last name of Winters, which is obviously her maiden name, but it's not her married name, and she's been married for years, so it's not like it's a new occurrence. But again, there's no new information here, and he goes through, how um, they managed to locate Tab living in California before one of the reunions. Again, nothing new here. It's just packaged up and they put a bow on it and slip it out like it's some kind of new information. For somebody who hasn't read the books, either one of them, it will be new information. But for those of us who have read the books, there's nothing there. Number 2, Spears and Jumbo DiMarzio. Art DiMarzio was a rifleman in Spears's platoon when he jumped on D-Day. Again, there's no new information here. The content creator tries to sensationalize the incident in terms of Spears shooting prisoners. This is well known. It's been well documented. Spears admitted to it. He admitted to it in letters to the major, which I have copies of. Art DiMarzio was video interviewed by historian Mark Bando years ago. That video is on YouTube. Anyone can access it. I spoke to Art DiMarzio before he passed away. We talked about what happened with Spears, with the shooting of the prisoners, and then the shooting of the sergeant in the company. All these things, Art was unburdening himself late in life, and he wanted to come clean with all this stuff. And he was very matter of fact at the beginning of it, but very emotional at the end. Again, if you want to see this, Art's video is on YouTube. You just have to look for it. And again, all he does is repackage Bando's work and doesn't give credit to Mark Bando in it, which is kind of troubling because Mark did the real heavy lifting here. I mean, I just followed up and spoke with DiMarzio years later, but I mean, it was Mark Bando that really did the work here. And again, he doesn't get any credit, and it's no information. He's just sensationalizing it. I mean, as for Spears shooting the sergeant in his own company, I know who the sergeant is. I know him by name. I'm not going to release that name because the sergeant's family is out there, and it would be cruel to do so at this point, despite the fact that Spears is long gone, and as is obviously the sergeant. But it doesn't do anybody any good to release the name at this point. But what I'm saying is, again, there's no new information with regard to the Spears and Art DiMarzio story and the shooting of the prisoners. All this stuff is common knowledge, but it's presented here like it's something new, and it's not. Now I want to talk about Ed Shames a little bit. The content creator relies on Ed Shames far too much for my liking. I knew Ed. I'd spoke to him on a number of occasions. He was terrible with details. Early on, when he was, first of all, we'll get something straight. He murdered German POWs at Bastogne, and I have no time for that kind of activity. Um, I realize he's Jewish and he had a grudge, a well n- in his is a well justified grudge in his case, but it doesn't justify murder. It justifies the grudge and the hatred, but it doesn't justify murder. So, and I have no time for that. And besides, live POWs are sources of information. When you murder them and you don't get any information, you've lost out on a source. So I look at it in two different ways. I look at it from a moral way, and I look at it from a clear military uh, approach. When Ambrose interviewed Shames for Band of Brothers, Shames had the worst memory because I've read all of the interviews because I have them. He had the worst memory of any Easy Company veteran that was interviewed that I saw that I ever experienced. When he was interviewed, he couldn't remember what platoon he commanded. He said he commanded second platoon, which he didn't. He was never associated with second platoon. He commanded first. He was assistant platoon commander for third platoon, and then later took over the platoon. Buck Compton obviously commanded second platoon in Bastogne. He also couldn't remember Shifty's nickname, uh, which was hysterical in its own right. But the fact that it comes to play later on, and we get to a slide about Shifty, and you'll see why it's a key piece here. He also couldn't remember who was on the rescue of the Red Devils over the Rhine in Market Garden, which is fine. Again, and then I'm going to defend Major Winter's uh, faulty memory later on in this. So I'm going to kind of give him a little bit of a pass on some of this stuff. But he couldn't remember that Don Malarkey, Rod Bain, and Eddie Joint took part in the rescue. And this was many years after the Ambrose interviews. This was, I believe it was the last organized Easy Company reunion that the vets attended. And Shames stood there in front of all three of those men, including, and also Brad Freeman, who was still alive, and said, "I'm the last surviving member of the company who rescued the British paratroopers in Arnhem." And all four, Don Malarkey, Rod Bain, Ed Joint, and Brad Freeman, were all standing there looking at him like he had an extra nose growing out of his face. And he was adamant about it. And I kind of stepped over and I said, "Hey, Ed, these four gentlemen right here were on that mission." And he proceeded to, one, disagree with me, and then two, try and berate me, which was definitely incorrect because Malarkey basically told him to knock it off. And then the four of them walked away from Shames. So, and Ed had the tendency to dislike anybody who got more attention than he did. And this include anybody who was featured in Band of Brothers, especially because he was not shown in the best of light. More on that later on. But this particular content creator seems to rely on Ed Shames way too much as a source. And it's shown that he has not been truthful over time about killing POWs. He hasn't been truthful about the men he commanded. And again, we'll get into this a little bit deeper later on in this presentation. But I just want to point out that this creator is using Shames as one of his linchpin sources, and he's not really trustworthy when it comes to a lot of this history. Whether he's forgotten it or he's manipulated it to make himself look better, which was something he did often. He's just not a trustworthy source. Moving on, and this is pretty much the one that kind of kicked off the whole discussion about this particular channel. And there's a video in which the creator basically stitched together AI renderings of Ambrose's voice interviewing Joe Toy, although it's clearly not Joe Toy. He has doubled down, tripled down on the fact that he says it's Joe Toy, which it's not, and he refuses to present the actual audio recordings to prove his point, and it's not. And his basis of his presentation is that Joe Toy had an Irish accent because Don Malarkey mentioned it in his book. Well, in speaking, first of all, I have copies of audio recordings of Joe Toy being interviewed, um, and he doesn't sound anything like the AI rendering that's in that video. And two, his Joe Toy's own family has confirmed that that's not his voice, and that Joe didn't have an Irish accent. So really, it calls into question all the content on this particular channel. But in this case, this is the one that kind of kicked it all off. And again, I'll go back to the point where I made where if a historian won't present his sources to show the math, they're probably hiding something, or they might have made something up and don't have a source for it. And this appears to be the case with this particular video, but I would go so far to say, based on the track record of this individual in question, this content creator, it's probably more than just that one. Johnny Martin and Bill Garnier. This is another video where it talks about Bill finding out that his brother had been killed in Italy. All well and good. A lot of the information is, again, stripped right from Band of Brothers. Some of it comes from the Majors collection, but one piece in it in particular was completely false. And I don't know if he made it up or it's the way he interpreted it, the content creator, but he wrote, where he stated in his video that Johnny, not wanting to tell Bill about the death of his brother, Johnny put the letter from his own wife into the pocket of Bill's jump jacket so that Bill would find it and read it. Now that is patently false. Okay. And I know this because I talked to Bill about it. And Bill said, no, I went to go to the latrine. I grabbed a jacket. Now, Johnny and Bill were both buck sergeants at the same time, E5s with 3 stripes. And he looked at a jacket, saw 3 stripes, and grabbed it. That's out of Bill's own mouth. Grabbed the jacket, which happened to be Johnny's. He put it on. He went to the latrine. And you're always looking to do something, according to Bill, you're always looking to do something to kill the time while you're in the latrine. And he started, patting his pockets, and he felt like there was paper in one of them, and he opened it up, and it was a letter. And guys used to share mail all the time. So he started reading it, and it's the letter from Johnny's wife. And she talks about Bill's brother getting killed. So he puts the letter back in the jacket and returns the jacket to Johnny, and then Johnny talks to him about it. Now, according to this individual, Johnny was being either he was scared to talk to Bill about it, or he was hiding it altogether and didn't want to do it himself. So he left it to the dirty work to the letter instead of talking, which would have been completely against the grain with Johnny. They were close friends up until their deaths, and they were as close as could be. So the idea that Johnny would purposely hide the letter in Bill's jacket is just nonsense. Bill said it himself. No, I grabbed Johnny's jacket I unknowingly grabbed Johnny's jacket when I was going to the latrine. So there's that. Sobel on D-Day. Here's another one. I love this one because I've already done an entire episode on Herbert Sobel on D-Day. This particular individual, in fact, was approached and presented my podcast, episode 22, and the individual said basically, well, why do I have to believe him? He's just some guy on the internet, completely ignoring the fact that he's just some guy on the internet. But anyway, the difference between he and I is I have sources to back up my statements. He does not, and he relies on the account of Ed Mauser, who I've spoken to Ed Mauser numerous times before he passed away. I spent a lot of time with him at Reading Air Show. I talked to him on the phone quite often. Ed darling of a man, was very unsure about the whole situation with Sobel. The articles that exist make him seem much more definitive in his accounting of it. He was less so in person, especially when we kind of talked through things. I wasn't leading him. I was just asking him questions, and we came to the decision that, but first we'll start from the top. Okay, Sobel landed with the seaborne elements of the 506. I don't know how many times I've had to say this on podcasts. I know I said it on Woody's. I've said it on my own, and the paperwork backs it up. Okay, regimental journals from the S1, S2, and S3 all record the arrival of the regimental S4 with the regimental supply chains from the beach. Okay, the other paperwork that supports this is he never had a jump star awarded for his jump wings because he didn't jump. He was awarded the CIB because he was a trained infantry officer and he undertook combat operations in Normandy. And generally, if you made landfall and you were under fire at any point, you got your CIB if you were an infantryman. Okay. He was also awarded a Bronze Star for meritorious service, not a combat action. The Bronze Star was for ensuring that the regimental supply chains made it to the regimental main. That's what he was given his Bronze Star for, as the S4. Okay. He was awarded the Invasion Arrowhead device for the seaborne landing. This is worn on your North Africa, Western European campaign ribbon. He was awarded that. Why? Because he made the seaborne landing. Without the Jump Star Award, which the paperwork shows he is not on the list for it, it indicates he did not jump. Now, let's get to the elephant in the room, Ed Mauser. Okay. Ed's interviews, he talked about meeting up with Sobel after the jump. Okay. When I sat down with Ed, he couldn't pinpoint when he met up with Sobel. Now, the thing is, he did not witness Sobel landing by parachute. Okay. For all Ed knows, by the time he got to Raycor. Remember, Ed talked about linking up with Burr Smith. Burr Smith and Rob Rader all link up and they make their way south from southeast from Samaraglis. Okay. At some point after 09, they arrive at Raycor because by Burr Smith's own admission, he got there just as the attack was in progress. And he was basically told not to go, along with all of the new joins, including Ed. So by the time that Ed and Burr and Rook Raider and all the guys in their column arrive at Breakor at Le Grand Chemin, the seaborne elements are coming ashore, including Sobel with the regimental supply chains. It's highly likely that Sobel advances up, meets up with regimental main, reports in, and he's there ensuring supplies are where they need to go. And it's quite possible that's where Ed ran into him at some point between then and maybe when the regimental main gets to Couleville later on that day. Some point in that time frame, Ed links up with Sobel, and that's his memory of him. There's no memory of a landing, of Sobel landing. There's no memory of Sobel wearing a parachute harness. There's just a memory of meeting up with him. Okay. And the last thing, another source that routinely gets cited on Wikipedia as well is an article that was written about Sobel's actions on D-Day. It is really hard to educate folks on how public affairs offices worked back then. Generally, they sent back a name, a general geographic region, and an award to a soldier's hometown, and that hometown would write up a story. In this case, the story was written up. The information about taking out a machine gun nest is largely fabricated because they want the boys to look good. They want the civilian population back at home to feel proud about what the boys are doing. When the word came back that Sobel had gotten a Bronze Star, some creative writer probably took it upon himself to write out this heroic action. Not only that, assigns it a geographic region in Normandy that doesn't exist. I implore everyone to go and do the research on their own if they're really interested in the topic. But this is another one of those linchpin videos that this creator has put out that is completely false. based on the full body of paperwork that exists, and supplemented by speaking with the veteran who is involved in the so-called action. Okay. If he's just using Ed Mauser's account that was written up in articles, it makes it look like Sobel landed near him. He didn't. So again, it's all about doing the research, but it's quite clear that the individual that's running this channel has never ever interacted with any of the veterans. So, and they could provide the context in a lot of these actions that is so severely lacking in some of these videos. The next one, Major Winters. One of the videos is basically, is he an anti-Semite? I mean, come on, people, really? This is just as a joke at this point. That again, this goes back to this hyper sensationalized nonsense that this individual is pinning their hopes on to get clicks. It's straight up clickbait garbage. Okay, the answer is no. The Major was fully focused on the defeat of Nazi Germany so he could finish his time in service and go home. And he felt that if he was the best at what he could do and he made the soldiers underneath him the best at what they would do, it would get him home sooner. Okay. He didn't care about anti Semitism. He didn't care about racial segregation. He didn't care about any of that stuff. He operated on trust. Now, you also have to understand his method of thinking. You trust what you know. And in this case, in the time leading up to D-Day, Winters had commanded both 1st and 2nd platoons. He knew the men in those platoons intimately. This is not to cast shade on 3rd platoon. He cared for those men as well, but he didn't know them intimately like he knew the men in 1st and 2nd platoons. So when a time came when he was the acting company commander, the company commander, and the battalion commander, he would lean on 1st and 2nd platoons before he would lean on 3rd platoon. Not to mention the fact that Shames, despite being a Toccoa man and a battlefield commission, he didn't trust him. He didn't like him. He was overbearing. He liked to yell. The funny thing is that you see Shames in the miniseries where they talk about him, thinks he needs to yell all the time to get his point across. That's exactly what the men thought about him because they wrote about it extensively. And I have a number of letters from the men, both to the Major, between each other, and then also to me, where they talk about it. This is again not to cast shade on Shames. He's a double volunteer. He did his duty. I've already spoken about how I feel about him in particular, but in the end of the day, it's quite obvious that the Major didn't trust Shames as a leader. Okay, that's why he leaned on 1st and 2nd platoons more than 3rd. Not because he didn't trust the soldiers in the platoon, but he didn't trust Shames's leadership style. He didn't like it. He felt like it was more like Sobel. And he felt like you didn't have to be overbearing. You didn't have to lead by fear. And he felt like that's how Shames led. But since they were so short of platoon leaders as well, it wasn't like he could go get rid of them. But the easiest way to deal with that was to kind of sideline him and not use his platoon as the point element for anything. John D. Halls. This is another one of these sensationalized videos. Again, he tries to the creator, this content creator tries to cast shade on the Major by making it look like there was some kind of concerted effort to misidentify John D. Halls in the Major's history of the Normandy fight. He made a mistake. He made a mistake not once but twice with the individual. He said it was the A Company supply sergeant at one point, and then he said it was John Hall. It's John D. Halls. John D. Halls served in the 81 millimeter mortar platoon for 2nd Battalion of the 506th. He served under Moose Heiliger. He was well known. He did play on the basketball team. Nixon and Winters did coach him. He knew exactly who Halls was. But over time, people forget stuff. I forget things that I did in Iraq. Okay. And that was 2003. All right. 50 years between the actions during the war. And even when he started recording his notes uh, about his service in a more expansive way for Stephen Ambrose, memories fail over time. So, but in the intervening years, the daughter of John D. Halls has come out, spoken about the situation. Halls was identified and he's been duly honored ever since. Everybody knows that he's the man that fell at Breakcore. I don't understand what the objective is to this particular video. Are you just trying to make the major look bad? Well, I mean, that to me it seems just like a shitty way of going about business. Excuse my language. I try to keep the language on a normal level because a lot of times I hope that maybe families are using this to educate their kids about World War II. I apologize if anybody, a younger generation, is listening there, but this really kind of just gets my hackles up about what's your motivation in the history you're trying to push on your channel. If this is the kind of thing you're trying to do, again, it just seems like it's all sensationalized clickbait garbage. Gerald Lorraine. Okay. Now, this one you'd have to ask John Orloff about because he's the one who wrote the dialogue that calls into question Gerald Lorraine's bravery. Now, in my book, I already knew that Gerald Lorraine had been a double Silver Star awardee, but you have to look at the insular nature of the rifle companies, and especially in the parachute infantry. Um, there is an internal competition just between platoons within a company. And if you weren't part of the company and you weren't part of a platoon or squad in that company, in the words of so many of my fellow Marines over the years and other service members that I've known, you don't rate. If you're not part of us, you don't rate. It's quite possible that one of the vets said to John offhanded during whatever interview sessions they were talking that he was a Jeep jockey because he drove Colonel Sink's Jeep. Now, the interesting part of that scene really is it wasn't Lorraine that missed the German in the field at Breakcore. It was Bill. And I talked to Bill about it extensively, and he admitted to it. He goes, yeah. He goes, Lorraine drilled him, but he didn't kill him. I finished him off. And that's fine. It doesn't seem like there really needed to be that line of dialogue in there. In fact, it would have cemented to me the Wild Bill legend more if they would have shown Lorraine drilling the German, and then holding fire out of compassion, and then Bill finishes him off. To me, that would have gotten the message across that this is no quarters given out here. But at the end of the day, the dialogue did Gerald Lorraine poorly, and for that, there's no excuse. Again, I'll try and message John and see if he'll respond about that particular line. But but really, again, it seems like this is just sensationalizing a topic. Yes, a mistake was made, but a mistake wasn't made with his awards. He was given 2 silver stars. Not given, he was awarded 2 silver stars. Okay. They don't give out the third highest award for bravery to a soldier twice because he's a coward and a Jeep jockey. So at the end of the day, that video is what it is. Shifty and Ambrose. Here's another one. There's a video on there about Shifty putting Ambrose in his place. And for in truth, I didn't watch the whole video because frankly, I know the whole story and I know why it was done. All right. There is the original galley drafts of Band, of which I have a copy of. There is a passage where Shifty requests not to go out on patrol at Bastogne. Okay. And if you read between the lines, it's almost like they're saying he's chickening out. The only problem with this is it didn't happen, at least not with Shifty. There was another member of 3rd Platoon that did request to be pulled off of patrol because he was scared. And I'm not going to say the trooper's name because the trooper's family is still out there, and I have a lot of respect for them, and it wouldn't be fair to them. But at the end of the day, this didn't have to happen because Shames couldn't remember who Shifty was. So he fed Shifty's name to Ambrose. All right. When Shifty got the galley, because Ambrose was sending chapters back to the vets to read so that they could take a look at it for accuracy, Shifty wrote Ambrose back, and it was a very impassioned letter. And I have a copy of it. And he basically says, this whole passage has caused me a lot of pain. I never shirked my duty. I never asked to come off of any patrols. And I don't know who told you this, but whoever did was a liar. And he says if it was Lieutenant Shames, he's lying. It got so heated between Shifty and Ambrose that Ambrose wouldn't respond to Shifty. So Shifty's daughter, Margot, who's an amazing person, wrote Ambrose and basically said the same thing. When Ambrose resisted, Margot just cut to the chase and wrote Dick Winters. And Dick Winters went to Ambrose and said, Shifty was one of the best soldiers in the company. And this is not true. Fix it. And he went back and fixed it. But it took a while to work through this stuff. And again, it sure you could make a video about this, and yes, it's pretty damning when you think about it. But Ambrose has got a very checkered uh, history when it comes to accuracy. Everybody knows it. He's been called on the carpet by the veterans of the Ox and Bucks. He's been called on the carpet by the air crew, the Troop Carrier Command air crews for his handling of their performance in Normandy. He's even been called on the carpet by the Easy Company vets, and we all know it. All right. It is what it is. But if Ambrose doesn't write the book, the miniseries doesn't get made, and the larger Band of Brothers story doesn't get presented to the general public. So you have to take the good with the bad with this. Am I sorry that it happened to Shifty? Heck yeah. I love talking to Shifty. He's one of my favorites. Um, so easygoing, so much fun to talk to, so down to earth. And I absolutely adore his family. And I'm proud to be able to keep in touch with them and talk to them. Um, and so you want to do right by somebody, and it seems like this content creator didn't want to do right by Shifty so much as he just wanted to present some kind of, you know, oh, look what happened here story when it doesn't really need to be there. Another one that was presented about Ambrose and Winters, and it's intimated in this particular video that they were motivated by becoming rich and celebrities. Well, that may have been Ambrose desire, but it certainly wasn't Winter's desire. Winters wanted to put the light on the men that he served with. It was never me, me, me. It was always Ambrose and later on the band writers who made Winters the central figure throughout the miniseries. But it was always Winters who wanted to put the light on his men. Now, those of you that have seen part of the Major Winters paperwork collection, and you've gone through some of the folders about the men themselves, if you'll notice, if you go in and look, almost every trooper that Winters kept in contact with, when Band of Brothers was about to come out, Winters sent a letter to the local newspaper of every veteran of Easy Company that was interviewed and said, you should do a story on this man who's one of your readers. He's going to be featured in this upcoming book. Now, for a guy who's wants to be a big celebrity, does this make any sense? When he's trying to put the celebrity on his men. So, first off, it's to me, it's a simple, i.e., naive but hyperbolic statement when he says the content creator says they made each other major celebrities and a lot of wealth. Ambrose made a lot of wealth on it. I don't know what Winters did, but Winters was already a wealthy man by the time Band came out. So to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense for him to say it made him a lot of wealth because he was already wealthy. And for Winters, yes, it made him a celebrity, it made him a household name, but I mean, that was not his goal here. All right. So it's the whole video in my mind is hyperbolic. There's no need for it. It's insinuating that the motivating factor between the two men was to become celebrities and wealthy. And that is not the case, especially for Winters. I don't know about Ambrose. I'll defer to my business partner, my tour guide partner, David. David worked for Ambrose, knew him, spoke with him often. He was one of his teaching assistants. He can talk to that a lot more than I can. In fact, one of these days, maybe I'll get Dave on here and we'll do an Ambrose special. But in this case, I think the characterization of Winters is completely inaccurate. And again, a video didn't need to be done about that. But if you're going to do it, at least deep dive it. Don't do a 10-minute quick hit garbage pod that doesn't really tell the story in total. Winters and Andrew Hill's watch. For those of you who don't know who Andrew Hill was, he was the regimental munitions officer. He was a warrant officer. And there's a scene where in Band of Brothers in episode 2, when Carwood is crawling back to the engagement area at Breakcore, and he's asked by Hill where the regimental headquarters is or where battalion headquarters is. He picks his head up and he's instantly killed. Later on, Winters, as he's withdrawing, finds Hill's body and he removes his watch. Now, I understand that um, Andrew Hill's family may have appeared. I don't know if they have or they haven't. There's rumors that they have appeared and they're upset that Winters took it upon himself to give away the watch later on. I never got a chance to ask the major about that in any of our correspondence. It really wasn't a topic of that I thought needed to be covered. In fact, it didn't even dawn on me to talk to him about it. The only thing I understood was it was routine that when troopers were killed, they were stripped of the things that were needed to continue fighting. And I've documented on the slide: ammo, cigarettes, food, water, and watches. Why? Because of timing. If you set your watch to a time and you say, well, okay, we're going to jump off at 16:05 hours, somebody's got to have a watch so you know when you're jumping off. So watches were critical for mission related timekeeping. Now, that doesn't answer the question of why the major gave it away to the young lady that was staying with the Barneses. I think probably because she was poorer than dirt and he felt like a watch was a nice gift to her. The content creator also seemingly insinuates that the major had some kind of designs on the young lady. She was in her early teens. The major's in his 20s. I think that was probably incorrect and obviously inappropriate, just to insinuate that, especially when you didn't talk to the man himself. And he already had a female pen pal that he was obviously smitten with. To me, it's just, again, you're sensationalizing something that isn't there. To what? To get people to watch your videos? Come on, just do better. Just disappointing. Do better. Uh, Another slide about something that's mischaracterized. Buck Compton at Bastogne. Um, in his video, he's trying to insinuate that Major Winters had Buck removed from the company once he broke down at Bastogne. I had a lot of time to sit down and talk to Buck about that, and I've talked to his daughter Tracy about that quite a bit as well. Untrue. It was Sync that removed Buck. Okay. Winters knew that Buck was an effective combat leader. And when I say effective, I mean heroic, tactically competent, and also his men would have followed him through the gates of hell. Okay. There's no way that Winters is going to lose that fighting man for no reason. What happened was because 2nd Battalion didn't have an aid station, Buck, after the wounding of Toy and Garnier, ran all the way back to regimental headquarters to get medical assistance. Yes, he was upset. Yes, he was calling for help. Sink witnessed it. He also had him sit down and rest, and he was examined by medical professionals that determined that in addition to being very upset, he also had trench foot and he was pulled off the line. And he eventually gets sent to Paris, where he becomes one of the regimental representatives on staff for sporting and a bunch of other things. And he finishes out the war there. And Don wrote about it and Buck wrote about it in their own books. And I'm not going to steal their thunder. If you want to read about what happened with the two of them, please go and buy their books. They're excellent. Okay. But he was beat up like everybody else. I mean, you have to understand the condition these men were in. And Buck was in just as bad a condition as his men, probably more so because he led from the front, moving from foxhole to foxhole, always checking on his men, ensuring his men had, even if he didn't. That was his leadership style. He led from the front and he gave of himself. He's one of these guys that's a magical leader. And to say that Winters removed him, which, by the way, categorically false, is just it's a silly attempt to denigrate the relationship between Buck and Winters. And there's another video this guy did where he tries to say the two of them hated each other. Not true at all. Major Winters respected the heck out of Buck. He knew how good a soldier he was and how good an officer he was and a combat leader. I mean, again, read the room, do the research, talk to the vets, understand what you're saying. And since you can't talk to the vets, you shouldn't be making stuff up. And this is completely contrived as far as I'm concerned. And there's some other stuff. Shames had said years ago that Herb Seworth had gone over to talk to a member of 2nd Platoon in Bastogne before he was wounded. And Buck told him to go back to his platoon and get back in his hole. Seworth went back and apparently told Shames got wind of it and he came over and tried to confront Buck. And then Shames is where he grabbed Buck and threw him against a tree, which is completely nonsense. If you ever spend any time around Buck and you ever spend any time around Shames, the likelihood of him throwing Buck up against a tree is slim and none. And anyway, and the incident, I believe the incident happened in that Buck told Herb to go back to his platoon and get in his foxhole. And the reason was because the Germans could see them moving when they were out of their foxholes, especially in the daytime. And all that would do was get them shelled. So tactically, it was the right thing to do anyway. But again, Buck's performance at Bastogne, all you could do is fault him for being a caring, dedicated leader, if anything. But he wasn't removed by Winters. Moving on. I think this is one of the last ones. It might be one more after this. Colonel Sink and the dressing down ceremony after the regiment returned from furlough after jump school. There's a video on this guy's channel where he talks about Sink's sadistic nature and yada, yada, yada. He completely ignores the fact that there are standards and there are rules, and that's the military runs on those. And before they were released for furlough, Sink stood on a platform. And if you're looking at this on YouTube, you can see him standing on the platform addressing his regiment. And he basically told them, go home, act like the professionals that you are, and don't be late coming back from furlough. He gave them 10 days. That's a lot of time, even with the transportation system being not nearly as developed then as it is now. And when men came back late, many of them were booted from the regiment. You have to have standards. He made an example out of members of the regiment at random. The member of Easy Company was a gentleman by the name of Greg Rotella. I recount the whole thing in my upcoming volume 1 of the Easy Company history that hopefully will be out by the end of the year. I spoke with Buck Taylor. Buck Taylor was the armed guard that escorted Rotella up as he was stripped of his paratroop accoutrements. Was this demeaning and disheartening? Yes. Everyone that watched it. But Sink told them, don't be late. You cannot have people violating the rules and regulations that have been set down. By making an example of these men, Sink told his entire regiment, this is the standard you would adhere to, or you will be out of my regiment. This content creator has no understanding of this. Does it appear that Sink is sadistic? No. He's enforcing the rules, and he's doing it in a very public way so that everyone gets the message. If you don't like it, don't pay attention to the military. This is why we do things, because we have rules and standards, and we have to be enforced. And sometimes those are put on public display, whether you like it or not. It doesn't make him a sadist. The enigma that is Roy Cobb. Here's another great one. For those of you that watched my Easy Company Q&A, again, I think this was episode 22. You can go back and listen to it again. I go full in on Cobb and his history. And then I talked about Cobb, I believe, with Woody on his World War II TV episode on the 10 Myths of Easy Company. This guy's such an, by his own admission, this content creator knows as much as anyone alive about Easy Company. But in his video, he doesn't even have a picture of the real Roy Cobb. There he is, if anybody's interested. That's a picture of Cobb being treated by a nurse after he's returned to the airfield with his wounding on the plane. Bull Randleman at Noonan. Um, this one I'm not going to give a lot of time to. He basically just shoots holes in what was presented and banned. And again, I love the production to death. I have many friends that were actors on it, that were part of the production crew, that were part of the writing team. I respect them all. They did a wonderful job in trying to bring the story, but there were things they got wrong. In this case, they had to dramatize Bull's engagement with the German trooper in Neunen. Okay. But what this individual who thinks he knows more about Easy Company than anyone alive didn't know that Bull actually had a bayonet duel with another German in Normandy after landing. Now, those of you who have accompanied me on my tours have been within about 30, 40 yards of the position where Bull was when he had the duel. The writers knew about both duels. They chose to make that episode more about Bull, and they centralized it around the bayonet duel, even though it wasn't really a bayonet duel. He just killed the German trooper. They just didn't want to overburden the series with two bayonet duels, simply put. Um, but apparently this fellow doesn't even know that there was another one. But and then just decided to shoot holes throughout that particular video about how everything was presented. But there's nothing new presented there. So I guess in summation, what I want to say is a lot of these videos, while they seem like they're drawing out new and inventive information or new uncovered information, really most of these videos are nothing burgers. If you've followed along on any of the YouTube channels like myself, or um, there are several others out there. And again, I'll call it Paul Woodidge's because Woody does a great job, and Easy Company is featured on there at least once a year. Um, and hopefully I'll be coming back on to do a second Myths of Easy Company episode with him. Some of these might appear on that, but again, in summation, please just be careful with the sources that you get your information about Easy Company. This guy seems to have just culled through the majors paperwork collection and looked for anything that could be a hot button topic, and starts producing these episodes that are 10, 12 minutes long that just completely miss the plot. They've lost the plot on it, mischaracterized things, and over sensationalized things that are really nothing burgers. So I hope everybody will be discerning about what they watch. Again, it is a little disheartening when you work hard to put out product and you get a couple hundred views, and then you see a channel like this that just pushes out trash day in and day out and has like 5,000 views per episode. And it just scares me that people are just gobbling this misinformation up. So just be very careful about where you get your information. And Lord knows, if you got a question about Easy Company, please send it to me. I will gladly answer it. And one of the titles I hold is the historian for the Band of Brothers Family Foundation. The family members voted to make me their historian, and I've known many of the families and the vets. I knew the vets, all of them up until their passing. I knew many of them for almost 20 years. I've known the families since the early aughts. It's a great source of pride that I'm able to provide that for them and answer all kinds of questions for them, and be writing these books, which are essentially their love letters to the men and their families. And I hope everybody is looking forward to getting them when I finally get them out. But if you enjoyed the video, please hit like and subscribe, tell a friend, pass it on, push the link out to everyone you know that might have an interest in Easy Company. I hope everybody will follow along. I know this seems like all I did was spend time trashing that particular channel, but garbage in, garbage out. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. I look forward to comments and questions, and look forward to seeing everybody later on. Take care.